We did we did bluebonnet pictures, and I decided to trim my beard, and I got a little short, and I felt naked.
Yeah.
And it's coming back quickly. That was a little too much.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I think Krista may have read that article, Sean, and like, shut it down. Shut her down.
Nah.
No, not so much. Huh?
Well, I don't have any nastiness up here, so it makes up for it.
Oh, okay.
Just relocates it.
So I read that article, and it's pretty biased.
You think?
Yeah, I was like, and what dude makes out with dogs? Like, how is this? Where is the transfer happening here? And like, I'm sitting here on the other hand going, who are these test subjects?
Yeah, which man with a beard agreed to this?
That's exactly right. Like, what?
I don't think any man agreed to this.
Mm-mm.
That's right. That's right. And you know, the funny thing too is like most guys I know with beards, they groom their beard more than any man without facial hair.
Mm.
Like my dad, he's old school. He's never worn a beard. He shaves dry every morning, which is stinking tough.
Oh.
Yeah. Every morning he does it. Shaves dry.
Dry, straight razor. All right.
Like does nothing on his face at all. But like every guy who has like a beard, they're like, beard oil, gotta condition it, gotta comb it out.
Got a special beard
Wax
shampoo in the shower.
That's right, man. That's right. I saw an ad on Facebook yesterday for beard straighteners.
Yeah, I saw that.
Like where it's a heated.
When I had my big long beard, that
Yeah.
would have come in really handy because I'll admit, I'm not when I'd get out of the shower, I was blow drying it and combing it long to try and straighten it out.
Really?
Oh, man.
I just saw the recording. Like, nope.
Tell us more about your beard straightening practices.
Oh, it was good.
Welcome to Caffeinated Theology's Pastor Talks. We are so glad that you have joined us today on today's video. Today we are going to be talking about evangelism within the church and what the role of the pastor is in all things evangelism within the church. And so today I'm joined by my good friend, Professor Dr. David Normand. Hey, David, how's it going?
Good morning. Good morning.
And then I'm also joined by pastor of First Baptist Church in Summerville, Georgia, my good friend, Sean Wagner. How you doing, buddy?
Good morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you. How's the weather up there?
Oh, we've had some beautiful weather, but there's a storm rolling in.
Oh, buddy. Oh, buddy. Well, we just
It
gave
seems
you.
like it. Yeah, I think it's coming from Texas to us. So thanks for that.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
it was a re-gift.
There you are. Oh, man. Well, on today's topic, like I told you just a second ago, we're going to be talking through evangelism and what that looks like in ministry and things like that. And so, first of all, let us just generally start out from more of a theological perspective. And so I'm going to throw this over to David. And so what is the role of evangelism in the church, David?
Well, I think evangelism is a central component of the church. We certainly gather for the purpose of worshiping. We gather for the purpose of glorifying God. But I think we see in the New Testament, we see in the scriptures over and over and over again, responsible to proclaim the gospel and to invite others to experience salvation and eternal life with us. And so if your church isn't doing evangelism, you have at best a disobedient church.
Yeah, absolutely. It is like one of the main purposes of the church is evangelism leading into discipleship. Yeah.
So according to Rick Warren, it's at least one of the five, right?
At least. Oh my goodness. You know, as I think about this, I think evangelism is more than just something that you're doing when you're going out to the lost. Evangelism is kind of the purpose or the identity of the church as we work through it. And so the church is there not only to reach the lost, but equip the church, the congregation, to reach the lost. And so evangelism is involved within ministry. It's involved within teaching and preaching. It's involved within discipleship, one-on-one and in small groups. It's involved within how we're engaging within our community and serving. It is the role of the church to evangelize the lost. And that's what David just said a moment ago. And that's what he said, that it is what the church is called to do. It is the Great Commission. So, Sean, you being a pastor here at First Baptist Somerville, you have been doing some amazing things in your community for evangelism. I want to ask you, though, very pointedly, what is the role of the pastor in evangelism? How key is the pastor in doing evangelism?
Well, if the pastor isn't doing evangelism, I don't think you can expect the people to do evangelism. So, if I'm not out sharing the gospel, why am I telling people on Sunday morning, go share the gospel? That's blatant hypocrisy. So as the example, as the leader, you set the tone for what is important to the church. If fellowship is important to the pastor, then fellowship will increase. But if discipleship and evangelism are keynotes that the pastor is actively doing in the community, I believe you'll see a church culture flourish around that, because that they want to be like their leader. They follow him. If you are actually leading your people, evangelism has to be the key. Absolutely. Vision, it trickles from the top down, right? Right.
If the pastor is telling the people, hey, you need to be sharing the gospel and loving on your neighbor and witnessing to the lost, but yet he's not doing that on a normal basis, then you said it makes him a hypocrite. But ultimately, the people won't catch that vision. They'll say, oh, yes, we need to be evangelizing, but then they'll never do it.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem of the pastor not doing evangelism is you're going to get to Bible passages where you say, yes, this is important. And really all you're doing is guilting people into doing evangelism. And guilt is not a powerful motivator for evangelism. What motivates people to evangelism is someone who went out and did it and says, look, this person received the Lord, they've changed their life, we baptized them, and they're growing in our church. That's a powerful motivator for evangelism, when people see that God is in the business of changing lives.
Amen, brother. Amen. Yeah, absolutely. It's been said once before and over again since then, evangelism is caught. It's not taught. It has to be modeled. People respond to that. They see God move, and then they go, oh man, I want some of that. Let's get in on it. Let's get on it. So it's good. Hey, Sean, let me ask you this. As a pastor, we'll get to all the methods of evangelism and things like that that pastors can do. But as a pastor, what are things that you're doing to intentionally share the gospel on a daily basis and intentionally share the gospel in front of your people?
Okay, that's a good question. We since I've got here, we didn't really have any outreach going on at all when we first got here. So one of the major things I did is I looked at one of our biggest events in the year. It's a backpack giveaway. We kind of live in a poor community, and so our church partners with a couple other churches, and we give school supplies right before the beginning of the year. And so I said, well, are we sharing the gospel at this event where we have 200 and 300 people from the community coming to our church? And the answer was no. And I said, that's okay. Let's change that, though. Let's do that this year. And so I equipped 5 members and walked them through how to do evangelism. And then I went out into the line, standing outside, coming into the door, and just started sharing the gospel down the line with people. And so sharing individually is important. They see me doing that, but I've also trained them to do the same. So there's about 3 to 5 other church members doing the same thing that I'm doing, while the other members are watching that and serving the community by giving away these school supplies.
That's fantastic. So you're training and giving a small group the responsibility, and you're sending them out. But at the same time, whenever you have those opportunities, you make sure that you're there and you're modeling for them.
And so don't expect your people to know how to do evangelism. Most of them are going to say, I want to do evangelism, but everyone needs training in something. And so giving people different methods, which we can talk about later, but if the pastor comes in and says, this is easier than your anxiety is making it. If you've been saved, I think it's Dr. Queen that told me that. If you know enough to be saved by the gospel, you know enough to share it. But what it takes then is a pastor saying, here's how I share it, and you can develop your method off of me.
Absolutely. Having that pastor draw that clear picture of what that actually looks like is hugely important. And although that method may change between pastors or even Christians, as long as it's getting done, that's what's important. That's awesome.
So your other question was individually, and how do you show members? So we had some members over at our house one time, and they were just about leaving, and then this couple came walking up with their son. And so I just went over to them and asked them if they had a church, and then allowed that to say, when they said no, I said, well, have you ever heard about Christ? And just make it a natural conversation of evangelism. And it just happened that the church members were there. So it was just, my house is here. People are walking around my house because it's on the corner and it's an intersection. But when I see them, being friendly and just talking with your neighbors and getting to know them is an opportunity to share the gospel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kristen and I, my wife, and I, we regularly have people over to our house after church. And a lot of times those are visitors. That's the fun thing about just being a pastor is people have all these preconceived notions about who you are as a pastor. And then you invite them into your house and they're like, whoa, yeah. See minds blowing. You're like, I
thought you were a holy person, but
where is the holy?
Your house is a wreck.
Stop talking about me, Sean. I have two little tornadoes. I have a good excuse.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, the fun thing about that is that usually what I'll do is I'll grab a Sunday school leader or something like that to come over to lunch with me. So it would be the couple that is visiting and maybe the couple that leads the Sunday school class that they would eventually go into. And then that becomes a gospel conversation or a religious conversation. And it's modeled right there with them. It's very natural. And they're in a place where we're sharing a meal together and having fun. And it's been inspiring to see, because now my Sunday school leaders are looking for visitors on Sunday and going, hey, why don't you come over to my house for lunch? And then they're having these gospel conversations as well, which is really cool. Let me shift gears a little bit though. Okay. What about preaching? The pastor is modeling evangelism and is preaching in some way. What ways are you doing that? How are you modeling evangelism in your preaching and things like that? And David, jump in on this anytime you're ready, buddy. I know you're teaching right now. David's just kind of over there on the side looking at us going, oh, okay, when can I jump in here?
And it felt a little bit like double Dutch, where the ropes are just spinning and you just jump in. Come on. Oh.
I love it, man. So tell me about the role of evangelism in preaching. What does that look like for a pastor? How can he encourage people to evangelize in preaching?
Well, I would say from a pastoral perspective, I would say every time you preach, you have an opportunity to demonstrate a way in which to communicate the gospel.
Amen.
Every time you preach, you have an opportunity to share the gospel in a new way. Now, as a preaching professor, I want to ensure that is tied to the text. I want to ensure that flows naturally from the text. And part of what that means is it's not going to be the same presentation every time, right? I think all three of us can think of guys who their gospel presentation at the end of their sermon looks the same. It doesn't matter what they're preaching on, whether they're preaching on tithing or they're preaching on the woman at the well. Every invitation sounds identical. I'm not advocating that. I actually think that every time we open our mouths, we have an opportunity to share the gospel, to get to Christ in a different way. And part of that sets an example for our people, because now they see different paths to get to Jesus.
That's good. Sean, what about you?
I think part of evangelistic preaching is what we've been saying. It's the gospel being presented. And so I think you do have to find different ways to present the gospel. But a lot of times what I find is that if I'm not preparing and very careful about that, I only present some aspect of the gospel and then call to respond. I don't present the body of what it really is, that there are sinners and that Christ died and you need to repent from that. There's the full gospel in there. So I think part of doing evangelism and preaching is being careful in your preparation to make sure the gospel is actually presented as it is, not just a chunk of it and a call to come to Jesus.
Well, and let me piggyback on that for just a second and say, early on in ministry, I was challenged to offer an invitation to respond to the gospel in every sermon. That was a challenge given to me, that if you want an evangelistic ministry, if you want to see people come to Christ, if you want people to feel confident bringing their lost friends to church to hear the gospel, then they need to know that their friends are going to hear the gospel, are going to have an opportunity to receive Christ. And so early on, I responded to that challenge to say, will you commit to share the gospel and offer an invitation to follow Christ in every single sermon? And that was a commitment I made very early on in ministry. And that's something that, to guys listening right now, I would say, if you haven't made that commitment, if you're hesitant whatsoever about making the commitment to ensure that you're communicating a call to follow Christ as a part of every sermon, then make that commitment. Don't hold off on that.
Absolutely.
What I've found is that the times when I forget to work on the call at the end of the sermon. So you put the whole sermon together, you get your whole application, and some weeks you run out of time to say, okay, I'm done. You need to work on the call like you do on the sermon. That's not, you're not done when the application is done. You need to work on what does it mean to call people, not just to have it tack on because, this is just something Baptists do. Work on the end of the sermon being the call, not just the application.
That's really good, Sean. Another thing that happens with evangelistic preaching is not just presenting the altar call and presenting a clear and concise gospel message, but also providing vision casting of evangelism within that, like the need to share the gospel, the reason why we share the gospel. And then even as a pastor, one of the things that I find very helpful in helping my people draw the lines in evangelism is sharing stories and testimonies about evangelistic encounters. I do that very regularly within my sermons, dealing with objections specifically to the gospel. I'll tell them of a time that I reached an objection in an evangelistic encounter or a divine appointment. And then I also tell of stories where people have come to faith through sharing the gospel. And one of the things that I've seen about that is that has really helped the evangelistic preaching in my church, because people understand that, you're going to get shut down sharing the gospel. There are going to be times whenever the gospel is rejected, and that's okay. But at the same point in time, there are going to be times whenever you share the gospel and people are going to come to faith in Christ. And that's awesome to see that. So let's do this. Let's move on to another topic, because we have a lot to cover in this episode here. And we know that evangelism isn't just modeled through preaching of the church. It's modeled through all sorts of different aspects of the church. And so let's cover this topic. What does evangelism look like in your church or in your ministry right now? Sean, you want to kick us off?
Right now, I've got an outreach team that's going out every other week to just go to community houses in our church. We're kind of located in the downtown area of Somerville, and within a mile of our church, there's a lot of neighborhoods and apartments. And so we've just been going street by street, knocking on doors and presenting the gospel. Or for those, you have people who just say no, thank you, and so then we invite them to church and we do outreach that way. But each week that we go out, I start with about a 15-minute training period on some method of doing evangelism. And then we go. And I say, you can either use this training or use this method when you're talking with someone, or just make it a comfortable conversation. And then the other thing I remind people when we go out is be safe. Go in pairs. If a dog's not on a leash in the front yard, which is just all over Somerville, be careful with that. You don't get mauled by the dog. So I think it's important that the community is now seeing we're going out regularly to talk with them and to pray with them. So even if someone doesn't want to hear the gospel, I still remind my people, well, ask them if you can pray with them, be friendly, and remind them we're a part of the community here.
That's good. So, Sean, just for our audience here, give us a little bit about your church size, how long you've been there, what is the style of your church?
Okay, I would say we're a traditional Baptist church in Georgia for certain. We kind of do the hymn books and the singing. We've got the steeple with the bells going after the service.
Loud
and,
bells.
And David will preach through them, so even if you can't hear him. But we've probably got about 70 to 80 members consistently come in, with about 50 and 60 in Sunday school. And our evangelism team is probably about 10 people total. And that kind of fluctuates given the week there.
That's awesome.
We've got some faithful evangelists who are regularly telling me stories of where they've gone and shared the gospel with. And they are the ones who pump me up to keep going. Okay, this is something we can build on and work with.
That's great. That's fantastic. And the reason why I wanted you to share that, Sean, is because you're in a church right now that's kind of going through a little bit of a revitalization. It's not a mega church. And sometimes there's this assumption where I can be, my church isn't ready to do evangelism, and you are breaking the mold in that, man. And I just applaud you in that. And I'm just going, go, Sean, go.
our people want to do it. They didn't necessarily know how to do it, but they're excited to do it. And so if I don't set up the regular time and say, my family is going, join us, then it won't happen. So I take my boys with me to go, and mostly because I guess people think I'm a lot nicer when I'm holding a baby. Conversations go better when the kids are with me. But my wife and I go out with the kids. We did that just this past Tuesday, and met some really nice folks in our neighborhood. And a couple of them said, well, we're Christian, but we have no church that has ever come and asked us to even go to Easter. So that was a benefit to going out.
Wow. That's awesome.
Don't throw out door-to-door evangelism, especially if you're in a downtown type area and your church is surrounded by a community. Have a presence.
Yeah,
absolutely. Are you want to throw anything in there, David? David's good. Okay. Oh, man. David, he looks at the camera sometimes, and I see everybody, and I know our audience doesn't see everybody, but he'll look at the camera, and I think he's going to say something, and then he just does it. So I don't know how to read that.
It's self-filter.
Yeah. Then I'll tell you what we do here at Harvey Baptist at my church. Now, we run around 250 is where we are right now, and we're in a college town, and so evangelism looks a little bit different than what it does for Sean in his context. And so what we do as far as just like evangelistic programming is we have evangelistic programs during the semesters. And so in the spring and in the fall semester, we have a different method of evangelism that I teach. And then I lead groups after to go door to door or to participate in some kind of evangelistic event where we go and we share the gospel and we engage with the community that way. And so that kind of works as our door-to-door effort. Now, I will tell you in the summer, the city that I'm in Stephenville, and it becomes a ghost town, which is kind of crazy. We have severe traffic in the school year, and then in the summertime, it's like, where did everybody go? Because everybody's on vacation and the college is out and all that stuff. So anyway, during the summertime, the evangelistic process in our church is really kind of minimal. We get involved in some community events that go on. We do a lot of things with our city. But aside from that, like door-to-door evangelism isn't really effective. And the reason why is because there are so many rental properties and there are so many apartments that they just don't have anybody in them. So we'll go knock on doors and we'll knock on 10 doors and we may have 2 people answer. And so that's kind of a learning curve that we've kind of had to go through. What we have found to be effective, though, is that still doing those things during those semesters has been hugely important for us. And then we try and leverage the summer months for our members to get really in-depth trained on how to do apologetics, how to do some type of evangelism, some type of new method. And one of the things that I have found in our church is that it has been fantastic for our people to go through this, because the more tools that they have, they don't feel hemmed into using an outline or some kind of process where they're going, okay, let me explain to you the acronym of faith, or all the points of the Romans Road, or evangelism explosion, or 4 spiritual laws, or something like that. They can use whatever they need to in whatever situation that would be. And they focus on that. And it's been really, really good. One of the primary things that I try and help our people do is learn how to share the gospel through an evangelistic testimony. Everybody has a testimony. David said it earlier. He quoted Dr. Queen that if you know enough about the gospel to be saved by it, then you know enough about the gospel to share it. And so that's a huge thing for me. I try and teach our people how to share an evangelistic testimony, because I want our people to know that sharing the gospel is not a program that happens on Tuesday night or Thursday night. Sharing the gospel is something that we do because we love God and we love people. And so I'm trying to equip people through programs in order to share the gospel. I'm trying to model for my people through visitation and community engagement what evangelism looks like. And then through the rest of their time during the week, I'm trying to send them out so that they will share the gospel outside of those programs and outside of those methods, to people that they're going to work with, to people that they live around, to everyday gospel conversations. And so that's kind of what evangelism looks like in our church. Now, it has been hit and miss in a lot of different areas. It's been hit in the fact that a lot of our people have adopted it and gone, oh man, this is what evangelism looks like. And it's given them a new freedom to be able to share the gospel outside of those scheduled times. But it's also been missed in some cases because people are sharing the gospel more, and it's easier to get discouraged whenever they're rejected for it. And so you're also having to come up behind this process and go, yeah, that's part of being a witness. That's part of being a Christian, is that you're going to be rejected. Jesus even warned us of that, right? He said, you know, the world will hate you, not because it hates you, but because it hates me, and they're seeing me within you. And so it's been a programming, a change of mindset, and it's been really, really good. The other thing that I want to add on here as far as evangelism in our church is that we have intentional evangelistic speakers come into our church pretty frequently. We encourage our people to bring people to church, but we have, as a pastor, I'm intentionally having people that I know that are evangelistic preachers come and preach in my church, come and preach in my pulpit. And I want to do that because when I articulate the gospel, sometimes people hear that and they just rush over it and they go, oh, well, this is the pastor. I'm expecting him to speak in this way. I'm expecting to hear this message, and they're able to kind of tune me out. But sometimes whenever an evangelist comes into my church that's different than me, people will go, oh man, it clicks. It's like, yeah, I've been telling you guys that for the last 3 months. Same thing. He adjusted the wording just a fraction, and then all of you want to listen to it. And so I'm intentionally having those guys come in there because I know that, you know, maybe my people get tired of me or something like that.
Yeah, but he was cool.
That's right. He had a full beard and he wore hipster glasses or something like that. I don't know what it is, but yeah, absolutely. I'm intentionally doing that as a pastor. And so that's what evangelism looks like in my church too, is I'm trying to freshen that up for my people.
And I would say it's important for guys not to get discouraged when he jumps on an evangelistic initiative and he's not seeing quick results. I would say, you know, don't be discouraged, persevere, hold on, keep doing the work. Paul told Timothy, right? Do the work of the evangelist. So, you know, we have biblical justification to persevere in those efforts. But I think Anthony, you would agree with me on this. Sean, I think you would agree with me on this, that you do not have a more excited evangelist than a new believer.
Oh yeah,
that's right.
Once somebody accepts Christ, they're the person who immediately starts inviting new people. And that brings an entirely new energy to your congregation and to your worship service and to your church. And suddenly seeing people come to Christ and respond to Christ leads to more people sharing Christ, which leads to more people coming and responding. And so it really takes on that flywheel look, where it takes forever to get it spinning. It takes forever to get it up to speed. But once you get it moving, it picks up momentum. And so I would just encourage guys who are struggling to keep doing it, to keep working it, to keep sowing the seeds, to keep sharing the gospel, and not to stop just because he's running into a lack of results, a lack of fruit. It will come.
Yeah.
And it'll come when you don't expect it to, from where you don't expect it to.
Okay, so I want to qualify this, because we're jumping into a next question here. What do you do when you implement an evangelism program and it seems like it doesn't work? Now, there is a tendency in that to sit there and just say, be faithful. And what I mean by that, or what I mean by that, is continue doing the same thing and just show up. Just keep doing it. But what I'm telling you is something different. I think whenever we see faithfulness is not just doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Faithfulness
there's a word that defines.
Hold on. Yeah. Faithfulness is doing your best to accomplish the mission that was given to you. That's what it means to be faithful.
Yeah.
To be faithful is to do your best. And sometimes doing your best in that sense is evaluating what you're currently doing and going, why isn't this working? And how can I do it differently to reach the cause, to accomplish the goal, to fulfill the commission? And so let me ask you this. As you guys are processing through that, what do you think are some things that we can do in order to accomplish the goal, to change things up whenever things aren't working?
I think number one, and I'll be quick, John. I think number one, a leadership trick that I learned early on was, when you make a change in the church, call it an experiment and give it a set amount of time that you're going to try it for. And so whether that's moving to a certain kind of small groups, to a certain kind of curriculum, whether that's moving to a different evangelism methodology or method, what I would encourage you to do is be explicit with your people. Communicate that this is an experiment. We're going to try this and give it a period of time. Now, give it a reasonable amount of time that actually gives it a chance. We're going to try this new outreach method for 2 weeks and then see how that works. No, that's not going to work. Give it 6 months. Give it 4 to 6 months, and then say, at the end of those 4 to 6 months, we're going to evaluate how well this is working in our context, because my context is different than your context, is different from your context, is different from most of our hearers' context. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to evaluate how well this is working in our context, and whether or not this is something that we need to adjust, whether or not this is something that we need to lean into, or whether or not this is something that we need to find another option. I would just encourage you guys, anytime you're making a change, and we know this from a leadership perspective, that any change is going to cost you something in terms of leadership capital. One of the ways that you can kind of minimize that cost is by calling it an experiment, because frankly, what you're saying is, we're trying this for an amount of time, and if this goes sideways, we can always go back to the thing we were doing before, or we can always change it. I'm not married to this method. I'm just trying to try something new. I would just encourage you to do that. But go ahead, Sean. I wanted to throw that in. I think that's important.
So there are no sacred methods. So evaluate the method is what you're telling us.
Absolutely. And evaluate the method, and state up front that this method is going to be evaluated after a set amount of time to determine whether or not you're going to continue it.
Okay, Sean, what do you think, man?
Yeah, so I have actually just an illustration of what Anthony and David are talking about here. What I tried to do is I went around and took my first year here and just researched and said, okay, what does the town need? And we don't really have any hangout place for teenagers or anyone to just hang out in the town. And so I went around and said, well, what would teenagers like to do? And generally the thing from adults that I got was, well, they need an open gym, somewhere they can go and play basketball and hang out. And so we started doing open gym on Mondays. And we did it for about 4 months range, where I was there faithfully every Monday, had it open. We did a big, we handed out like 1,000 invites to it at the town. Nobody came. Went over to the rec center that also has a gym. I mean, our church has a gym, so it was easy to do open gym. The rec center, I asked, I said, so what do you guys, how are you getting teenagers in to do the open gym that you have? And they said, we don't have anybody doing it. Teenagers just don't want to do open gym. And so then, instead of asking adults, I asked my teenagers, and I said, well, is open gym something you guys would do? No. Oh, okay. So outreach method, evangelism to the community through doing gym and that way, big fail for me. But then I started asking, I said, okay, you're a teenager, you're in public school. What could our church do to help you to reach people in your school? And they said, well, everyone watches YouTube. And I said, okay, so if we had a way that we could create some YouTube videos that were evangelism or a Christian worldview, you'd be willing to show someone on your phone that video and say, hey, our church made this. Do you want to watch it with me? And they said, yeah. So we're going to try that next. We're going to try to video record some things and to say, okay, yeah, not just saying this is my pastor, but here's an interesting illustration, interesting YouTube channel that I work on, or the teenager works on, and say, well, you want to watch a video that I made? Almost every teenager is willing to say yes and get out their smartphone and watch it.
That's fantastic, Sean. That is such a good thing, man. That's awesome. In my previous church, open gym worked. That was like a thing. I mean, every time we had a ton of teenagers. But so I think what we're getting to here is that not only are you evaluating the method if it's not working, but then you evaluate your context. What's happening within your community, what's happening within your people. And let me get to a third one I think you need to evaluate. You need to evaluate your people. I see a lot of pastors, they want to start a visitation program, and then they show up on that Tuesday or Thursday night faithful and ready to share the gospel, and then nobody comes. And then you're going like, where is everybody? Why isn't anybody coming? Oh, I'll just be faithful. I'll go and do it by myself. And that may be your calling. You may have to do that for a period. Let's be real there. But I don't think you're effectively evaluating your people or figuring out your people and leading them well. And so let me throw this out there that has been monumental for us as a church. We evaluate our people through spiritual gifts test. We ask every single person who joins our church to take some kind of a gifts test, because we believe in the gift of the evangelist, and we believe that people are gifted at evangelist. So if I know that Bob and Jim and Tom are gifted as evangelists, and let's throw Susie in there too, because ladies can be gifted at evangelism as well. Yeah. Whoa, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to do that. In fact, some of the ladies in my church are probably the most gifted evangelists I have.
Absolutely.
And so let's be clear on that real quick. But if I know I have a group of 5 to 10 people who are gifted as evangelists in my church, those are the people that I tell, you need to be here on Thursday night.
Yeah.
You need to be here on Tuesday night or Wednesday night. And then I train them. And those are the people that I say, okay, let's go. Let's do this. And obviously I'm inviting everybody in because everybody's called to share the gospel. But those are the people as a pastor that I'm really trying to go, okay, you're gifted as an evangelist. Let's work in that gifting. Let's build that gifting. Let's equip that gifting, and let's go. And figure out how to work with them. So if evangelism isn't working, some kind of method or some kind of tactic isn't working within your church, first evaluate the method, then evaluate the context, and evaluate the people on who you have and where they're serving and how they're serving well. So I think if you do those 3 things, that you're going to see a shift in what's going on in your church. And so it's good. So with that being said, guys, we're all in different contexts. Let me ask you this. What is the role of the evangelist in the church? Now, we're not talking about the office of evangelist. We're talking about the gifting of evangelist. What, as a pastor, if I know that somebody has the gift of evangelism in my church, what am I going to do with them? How am I going to lead them and foster that gift within them? I already gave you one by making sure that I'm incorporating them in the leadership of sharing the gospel and encouraging them to share the gospel and equipping them to share the gospel. But what are some other ways that you can lead them as a pastor?
Well, developing their skill is, I mean, just because they have the gift of it doesn't mean they have all the practical tools they need to use it. And so helping them to even say, okay, here's another method. Here's another way of presenting the gospel. Here's some good transition sentences even to help you if you're not good at transition. I'm terrible at transitions. I mean, I'll go from like talking about sports to, hey, do you know Jesus? No transition.
Those bridges can be hard.
Oh, and so, I mean, I'm just terrible at making a conversation normally flow into it. It's just, I'm here for this. I'm going to tell you the
You're
gospel.
generally bad at conversations, period. So trying to transition to Jesus, I can see how that.
Oh, right.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
David is correct. I'm much better at reading from old dead people than reading living people in front of me. It's that
My
Ouija
spiritual
board
gift
concept.
is encouragement.
Thanks, David. Don't tell David you're sick and dying. He might just look at you and say, gross.
David is not our gift of mercy. So David is our teacher exhorter.
I'm the Barnabas of this group.
No, you're not. Paul would have quit.
I'm going to give you young Paul.
Paul would have been like, no, I can't do it.
That's right. That's right. David would have been like, yes, you cannot.
You should probably go back to making tents.
John Mark messed up. He's done forever.
That's right. You ruined him.
Oh, mercy. Okay, so Sean, you had us on a good track there.
I know.
And then David, I get it. Yeah. Thank you, Dr.
Story of
Norman.
this podcast.
Oh my goodness.
It's going so well.
David, how would you encourage somebody with the gift of evangelism in your church?
So my thing is going to be, I want him encouraging
or her,
our
David.
church, him or her in our church. I want to utilize this person of an unspecified. No, I want to utilize them not only. I'm not seeing them only as my project. I want to utilize them to encourage the full body of the church. And so what I would have them doing is, yes, I would have them sharing testimonies in front of the church of gospel encounters. I want a very helpful method that I've seen other churches use is when you're baptizing a new person who's come to faith as the result of someone else's evangelistic efforts. I want them in the water with them. I want them standing alongside them as a not only as a as a reward, but I want them standing there as a testimony of what God is doing through their evangelistic efforts, and which is a testimony and encouragement to the rest of the church. So there are different methods to use, but I would really want to emphasize their encouraging and pushing the body forward in their evangelistic efforts.
Amen. Amen. Man, we got a lot of good ideas on evangelism, and there are a ton of other things that we can work through in ministry and evangelism. And I just want to encourage you, if you're watching with us today, make sure that you post any other ideas, any other topics that you want us to talk about in the comments below. And then that way we can get to those and cover those in a future episode. And we're going to go ahead and shut it down today because of time. But we hope that you have a blessed week and you go out and share the gospel and many people get saved in your ministry. You guys have a blessed week and we'll catch you later.
Bye-bye.